Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you all here. Appreciate your presence. It's good to be back. As you know, I was visiting my brother last week down in Pensacola. It's good to see him again. Now, the casualty of that visit, though, is that for the first time, your preacher's going to have to use a Bible today. I left my iPad, I think, down there. So if I look confused or if I look discombobulated a little bit doing this, then that's why. It's, the preacher using a Bible. That's pretty unheard of. But we're going to try that today. And hopefully that will go well. But it's good to see everybody again. As we continue, as we talk a little bit about something that we oftentimes don't talk about prayer. It seems like it's easy as preachers and even as teachers to kind of just assume that we have an understanding of prayer and that we're comfortable with the idea of prayer. And that, after all, prayer, in a lot of ways, is the easiest thing that we do, as a Christian. When I am baptized into Christ, I immediately, there's a lot of things I can't do as a Christian, but I immediately have the ability to pray to God and to be able to do all that prayer requires me to do. And yet, I'm not sure that there's anything that if I wanted to point out one thing that we as Christians struggle with or feel dissatisfied with, if I was to, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. I thought about doing that, but I'm not going to. But just, if I were to ask you, how many of you would say that you are comfortable and satisfied and happy with with your prayer life, whether it be in terms of the amount of time you spend praying, the effectiveness of your prayer, what it does in your life, whatever it might be? I would suspect that there would be very few of us that would raise our hands. Most of us tend to see our prayer life as an area which we feel like could be improved in some way. It's the easiest thing to do, and yet for some reason it seems to be one of the hardest things that we do. There was a survey back in 2005 that was done by Ellis Research, and they surveyed a number of pastors, religious leaders, whoever were around the country, and they asked them about their prayer life, and 16% of them said they were very satisfied. 47 were somewhat satisfied, 37 somewhat dissatisfied, or very dissatisfied. That's a pretty interesting number when you think about it. The number of people that are supposed to be religious leaders in America, but when you ask them about their own prayer life, it could be a lot better. And for whatever reason, when we think about why that is, we ask ourselves some questions. Are we constantly praying? Well, a lot of times maybe we are constantly praying, but we're not really praying with the effectiveness that we want. But sometimes we also feel like we maybe don't pray as much or as often. Our prayers maybe are relegated to at night when I go to bed or before every meal, and that's my prayer life. And why is that the case? And it may very well be that prayer is not something that I can truly multitask and do. Prayer, unlike a lot of things in my life, I have to devote that time to focus my energies and my mind and my thoughts specifically on God. Now, I may be able to pray. I've known people that will say, and I do as well, pray while driving down the road sometimes. I can do that. I may be able to pray to myself, to God, while I'm doing some kind of menial task that doesn't really require a lot of brain function on my part, that I can do those things. But ultimately, the best prayers, the most effective prayers seem to be that when we're able to go into our room or wherever it might be, shut out everything of the world and simply talk to God without any and that requires time, doesn't it? It requires me to put away the things of this world, all the distractions, all the other things that I could be doing, and carve out this time specifically for God. Maybe that's why we struggle sometimes with that idea. And sometimes it's not so much the volume of our prayers. Sometimes it might even be, do I feel like I'm praying for what I really need to pray for? Do I even know what I need to pray for? It can be a very difficult thing because there's so much that we should be praying for. When we think about all the people that need our prayers, all the situations in the world, our relationship with God, our own struggles, our own difficulties, those that we know who are sick. And, how many times have we thought, man, I know I've left people off. I prayed for the people I think, but I always miss somebody. Is there almost a feeling of futility that I don't feel like I'm praying for what needs to be prayed for? I'm not taking advantage of what I need to be doing. And maybe the most difficult of this is, do I really see the outcome of my prayer? Because a lot of times what will happen is I'll pray for something. We talked about this in the class a little bit, the idea of praying and not giving up, not losing heart. And it's kind of contradictory in a lot of ways, because sometimes we see God saying that he will answer our prayers speedily, but then sometimes he tells us to pray and not lose heart. And we think, well, which is it? And the answer, of course, is both. But the idea is that I continue to pray and I pray and I pray and I don't really see anything. And at some point, do I feel like, well, my prayer just isn't doing what I want it to do. It isn't accomplishing what it's meant to do. So a lot of times I think this is focused. When we think about how satisfied we are with our own prayer life, it has to do with how we look at the outcome of that prayer. What happened as a result of my prayer? I prayed. That should have some sort of a product at the end of it that I can look at and say, there, my prayer has been answered. I pray, and therefore my prayer was effective. And that's typically is how we look at prayer very much as an output-based action. And I'd ask the question, would we be more consistent in our prayer? Would we be more confident in our prayer if we had a stronger faith that that prayer had accomplished the goal for which I had prayed? I think most of us would answer that yes. If I knew, and if I had 100% faith that whatever I prayed for right now, God would do, and he would do it today. How many of us would be on our knees right now praying to God? There is a certainty kind of breeds the idea of confidence, but the problem is a lot of times we're not so certain if our prayers are really accomplishing what they need to do. And so today, I want to take a little bit of a different approach to the idea of prayer. As I said, we typically look at prayer based on output, but I want to try something different. If we judge our prayer life, think about this, by whether God has given me what I asked for, then we've chose the wrong goal. If that is my goal in my prayer life, if I'm going to evaluate how good my prayer life is, or how successful my prayers have been, as I gave God a petition, God heard my petition, and God did what I asked for me when I asked for it, in the way that I asked for it, then we've really missed the point about prayer, because that's not how prayer is designed to work. But a lot of times this is why people get discouraged about prayer. So what I wanted to do today, I want to look at 5 purposes of a successful prayer life, rather than looking at outcome. Let's think of some other ways that we can judge prayer in terms of how it has affected my life. And by the way, if that 5 makes you nervous, it used to be 7, all right? And by the way, this is not meant to be ironic at all, but the 2 that I removed were patience and gratefulness and thanksgiving. So you're welcome for giving you this shorter lesson. So we'll see how that works. That was totally unintentional, but this is not designed to be an all-encompassing list. This is all the things that prayer will do for you. But I think that if you look at these 5